How excellent. Hey, everybody, it's me, Leah.
And it's me, Bethany.
And we're the Paranormal Putas. We're super excited because it's an all-new episode, I think, yeah?
I think so. I don't know what we're doing here.
It's like we're in the future, but going back in time because this new episode is actually from our live recordings, yeah?
Yeah, this was like all the way back in June, and we really wanted to release them sooner. It's just that life is crazy. A lot of shit was going on this year, and it was just a lot. Anyways, regardless, we're finally here.
Oh, yeah.
We're finally releasing this incredible episode. And in this episode, we talked to Frank, who is the owner of Curia Arcanum House of Curiosities. And next week, we'll be releasing the episode where we talk to Consuelo, who works at the Curia Arcanum.
Oh, yeah. Very cool people. We were so excited that they let us record in their space. It's such a cool space. If you're ever in Austin or if you're in Austin already, please, please, please go check it out. They have such awesome stuff.
They're very welcoming people, you know, for sometimes when you go to like an occult shop, like it can be a little intimidating, but these people are just so warm and so sweet. And it was seriously awesome to work with them. And I hope we get to work with them again in the future.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess here it is. Here is our first interview with Frank. It ended up being a two-part because Frank's knowledge is incredibly vast.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked him some pretty big concept questions about occultism. So let's get into this shit. Whoa!
All right. Hey, everybody. It's me, Leah.
And it's me, Bethany.
And we're the Paranormal Putas. We are so pumped. So pumped right now for a couple of reasons, right? Frank, let me know if I'm yelling at you.
No, you're good. You're good.
We are spending this lovely day and we are coming at you live and we are hanging out with Frank. Baby sister, tell them where we're at.
Big sis, we are with Frank, who runs Curia Arcanum here in Austin, Texas. Woo-hoo. Hey, Frank, how you doing?
Hello.
So Frank is awesome, and the first time we came out to the shop, we got to talking about, just spooky stuff, occultism, magic, and all kinds of things. And his knowledge is just so vast that I was like, we have to talk to him again. So here we are. And I also wanted to say that Frank has his own special secret society that's not so secret.
Not so secret society.
The not so secret society. And it is the Order of the Fancy Hat. And I am now an honored and pledged member. I have my membership card. Thank you, Frank, for swearing me in.
Thank you. Yeah.
But
yes, official now. Yeah.
Officially non-official.
As are most things around here. Yep.
Awesome. So, Frank, how did you get into, I guess these interests of yours, the occultism and all the paranormal stuff?
Well, I guess first let's start off with the less serious and move to more serious.
Okay,
So we'll start off with not so serious. So the Order of the Fancy. Congratulations.
Woo-woo.
Yes. Oh.
Round of applause, Bethany.
It's a joke. No.
That's right. Yes. Tell us how this came about.
So, when we first opened up this location here about 2.5 years ago, I ordered about 24 fez hats, thinking like, oh man, who doesn't want a fez? I mean, fezzes are cool, right? But they sat in the garage, and they sat there and sat there and sat there. So finally, we got patches with the shop's logo, and it just made sense. Oh, we could put the patches on the hat. Voila, we have shop fezzes. So I took a picture of myself wearing one of the fezzes standing in front of Toth, that when you come visit us, you will see Toth standing outside welcoming you as you come in. But I was standing in front of Toth wearing one of the fezzes to announce, hey, we sell shop fezzes now. And I made the mistake of putting it online. Because when you put something online, that means anybody can answer. And anybody did. So I got accused of being a Masonic Satanist. Because in some parallel universe, Satanism and Freemasons got together and had a baby and it was a fez. I don't know. but
Sounds right.
but you know, and initially I wasn't even going to bother to respond, and you know, my wife Kat, God bless her, you know, convinced me, no, you know, should say something. And I was feeling a bit of a smartass that day, and so I responded, well, we don't believe in any of that in the Order of the Fancy Hat. And at that point I said, well, shit, I'm going to double down on this. Yeah, and made signage and membership cards and the whole thing. So I guess the lesson of the story is, if you get trolled, use it to your advantage. You know,
Yes.
but so, you know, we did that for about a year, and you know, and then the Chronicle last year put out their best of lists, and you know, my friends who have shops and other things were posting like, hey, look, I won this, I won that, and I'm feeling a little FOMO, like maybe one of these days I should actually like try to get something. And I go to lunch, I come home back, and you know, I sit down in front of the computer and I see you've won. I'm like, what? But what made it even weirder was you've won for the Order of the Fancy Hat. So I turn to my wife and I'm like, we either won something or this is a joke. Hold on. But sure enough, and what we won for was Best Not So Secret Society. And once I saw that, I was like, I never need to win anything ever again. I mean, when you've accidentally started a not so secret society, you know, just as a lampoon, but yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, again, the moral of the story, you know, when someone is trolling you, use it to your advantage.
That's amazing. Congratulations. And I am so honored to be a part of the society.
It is. So I think now it doesn't entitle you to anything other than wear an awesome hat. I mean, let's keep that in mind. But basically, we're just stripping away anything extraneous, you know, like an oath or obligation or responsibility or anything else. And just jump right to the cool headwear.
Oh, yeah.
And voila, there you go. And you get it. It holds the headphones in place.
It really does. Thanks.
Sure
I have no idea what I look like right now.
No, you look awesome.
I feel awesome.
You look better than typical, you know?
I hate you. So, I hate to disrupt the flow because I should have asked for this earlier. I kind of need to get on the Wi-Fi.
Oh, whoops.
The only thing I forgot is to pull up the dang questions. Do you have like the PDF?
I think I've got. Here we go.
Okay,
all right.
awesome.
So please introduce yourself. Hi. And actually, let's. So my full name, like my full legal name, is actually Francis Houston Blakely Suchmel III.
Wow.
That is my legit name. So
That's amazing. You
makes
were
me
born
sound-
for this, Frank. You were born for this.
It makes me sound like I should own a bank or part of aristocracy.
No, it makes you sound like you should be the leader of a fancy hat
There
society.
you go. Okay. Well, my calling is complete. All right.
Well, Frank, we're wondering, have you ever had any paranormal experiences, encounters at all in your life?
Yes.
Awesome. Can you tell us about them?
Man, which one? So I've got one that's kind of cool. So I was probably, you know, and this is a pretty early one. I was probably about 17 at the time, and you know, I don't even remember what I was reading, but it made reference to the I Ching, and it talked about how it was something that had been practiced by so many people over such a long period of time that it had almost taken on a life of its own, like that there was a spirit, you know, of its own that was there. So I you know, took it upon myself to do kind of a little visualization experiment. And I'm like, okay, you know, I'm going to try to channel, you know, this. And so I envisioned, you know, and, you know, what would be, you know, the spirit of the I Ching, standing, you know, in my room and just being there. And then the wildest thing happened. My cat walks into the room and goes and sits down right next to where I'm visualizing this. And literally, and talk about having a life of its own, you know, in this visualization, you know, the elderly gentleman that I'm imagining, you know, leans over and starts petting my cat. And my cat responds as if she's being pet. And I'm sitting here witnessing this. I'm like, what the, you know, this is pretty wild. And it goes on for a few minutes. So that, Yeah, and then of course, like normal cat fashion, my cat gets up and walks off. But yeah, that was one of the more interesting ones I think I've had.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Have you had anything happen in recent years?
Yeah, so when we were at our older shop location, which was over on First Street, we had things happen there all the time. I mean, there was something going on in that area. Some good and some benign and some kind of scary. But even starting from like day one, when I went in to go look at that property, there was a door in a secondary room that went downstairs into, kind of a garage area. And as I'm walking through the space, just kind of imagining where everything would go, I'm in that back room and I go back to go into the front room, and that door that had previously been closed, as I turn around, is now mid-shutting. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of big. But my first thought was actually not anything paranormal. It was actually like, oh, this building's been sitting here for a while. It's close to downtown. Maybe we've got squatters. So I'm going down there to tell them, like, hey guys, sorry, I'm renting the place now. And so I end up doing what you always yell at people in horror movies not to do. I go down into the basement alone, without electricity or anything. And of course I go down there and nobody's down there. And, so I go back up and I'm, old building, things, happen, whatever. And I kind of write it off and I don't really think much of it. And then throughout the next weeks, as we're building out the place and getting everything ready, I mean, we had just a number of things happening, lights going on and off. My wife one night was sitting outside in the car waiting for me. And, when I go to the car, she's like, hey, did you just knock on the window? And I'm like, no, when would this have been? No, about 60 seconds ago. And I'm like, no, I was like way over there about, just shutting, the door and locking up and coming down here. So we just had a whole slew of really wild and weird things happening. And now I can tie it in with something that's right behind you.
Ooh!
So,
is it the mirror?
Yes, it is.
I knew it. I was ready for the mirror.
So what ended up happening was the night before we opened in that old location, I had a dream. And in this dream, the spirit of the house, comes to talk to me. And, I had been moving stuff around and cleaning stuff out left and right. And in the dream, they tell me, look, you can move anything, but just don't move the mirror. It's the only way I can see outside. And the way that mirror was placed was kind of placed at an angle, and, where that the bottom floor windows were kind of like high up little, rectangle windows, so that, if you look in the mirror, you'd see almost like, if you're familiar with the story of the Lady of Shalott, where she saw outside due to the mirror. Anyway, but it was kind of, reminded me of that. So don't move the mirror. And so, of course, when, the spirit of the house comes to you in a dream and says, don't move the mirror, you don't move the mirror. So yeah, I ended up leaving it there. And interestingly enough, we had other people come by that were, sensitive or otherwise clairvoyant, and one day in particular, someone had said, look, you have a spirit of a little girl, hanging out here. And I was like, really? Let me show you something. And so we went down and I showed her the mirror where it has the name Sarah written, and that is the mirror that I was told not to move. So I'm thinking, if you are a child, in the spirit, child, you wouldn't have been able to see out those windows that were too high, and it would make sense how at this almost diagonal, tilted mirror would be the only way you'd be able to see out the window, through the reflection. So, once again, going to the moral of the story here, don't move the mirror if the spirit tells you not to. Just leave it right where it is.
Oh my god! And I'm sitting right by this mirror.
Cool. I didn't want to sit in that corner. I was like, that's the mirror.
That's awesome.
So say hello and.
Hey, Sarah.
There you go.
I love that you brought it with you.
She's a friendly ghost.
That's awesome.
Now, another thing, we actually did go through a little bit of a to-do when we were moving. We're like, all right, well, do you want to, stick around here, leave the mirror here? Or do you want to come with us? And so it in the positive response. So we brought the mirror with us, and now, whenever you come here and walk by the mirror, just wave.
It kind of looks like a kid's mirror too, because it has like little happy face stickers, and it says, "I have clean hands." So Sarah's got clean hands. Thanks, Sarah, for not spreading germs.
That's what we can all hope for in the afterlife. Clean hands.
But some of the stuff I really wanted to talk to you about, Frank, was occultism, really, because that's kind of, I feel like, what we talked about a lot when we first met. And I want to know, when did you get into occultism, and what personally drew you into studying these practices?
So we're getting into the serious question.
Yes.
The serious question.
The heavy
I feel like
hitters.
I should. Man, I don't even have a tie on. Serious. Serious this is. No, so purely the definition of occult is, either hidden or, otherwise unknown. So, that would be from, a million questions, and definitely those questions that were very poignant to, I think, the most fundamental question anyone could ever ask. And I think it's one that, to a certain extent, we all ask ourselves every moment of every day. What the fuck is going on?
Yes. Relatable, yes.
But if you really boil it down to what, drives, a lot of those studies is that it's like, what the hell is happening? So I think a lot of it, has to do with that. But of course, in that realm is a bunch of mystical and spiritual practices and things like that. And again, that could run the gamut on all the different, interests that I've had over the years. Everything from, whether it's Taoism or what we would think of as Western occultism, which, most commonly is thought of as a combination of like alchemy, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, which also incorporates like astrology and divination and a million other things. As well as even the works of Carl Jung, who very, very much, leaned on the occult in his own theories. For Carl Jung, when he's explaining even his own psychological principles, one, where he talks about individuation, that process of, becoming whole, and I could go and ramble on that quite a bit, and how that correlates to, a lot of the aims and goals of a lot of these things. But he relies heavily on many alchemical works, especially those during the Renaissance era, in explaining this process, because for him, he saw it as an alchemical process that we were going through in this process of reintegrating these divorced aspects of self. So he very much was in line with a lot of these principles himself.
So it kind of rooted from this exploration of like, why am I here type of thing?
Oh, I think it's at the root for a lot of people is what that is. But a lot of it is, which of course that then leads on to, okay, well, not only what's going on, what am I in relation to all of this, and what is the interactivity, the almost biofeedback loop that gets created, through this experience and everything else.
I love that. That's so cool. What are some of the basic elements of occultism?
Well, a lot of it depends on who you ask. You're going to get a very different answer. But I mean, just going historically, we're again talking about alchemy, Hermeticism, and some form of Kabbalah. But some form of those, and again, under that wide umbrella, you also find astrology and different forms of divination and everything else. And also, it would depend, what. There, you're talking about almost purpose and goals and aims, and one of the interesting things to keep in mind is, when the term occult first really started being used, and we're talking about like 1500s in the occult, it was the occult sciences, right? And this was not, of course, the science that we think of when we think of today. The science today is very practical, peer-reviewed, and very much tied in with commerce. What is done and developed and researched, there's usually some product or something at the other end that's like, okay, that you're doing this for a reason, this is what it's for. Back in those days, you just had a wealthy patron or someone from the aristocracy or, the courts or somebody who is basically funding you. And really, the only thing you were obligated, in most sense, was to give some form of divinatory, usually some form of astrology or something, and this is what's going to happen, and very John Dee, kind of thing, as he was. But so back then it was much more of an almost philosophical, study and debate than it was, getting into the hard sciences. But then, that's also where you have, the genesis of a lot of alchemy. And alchemical texts as well. And then really what you're talking about, we're going back to that basic question again of what the hell is going on. This was supposed to explain, what are the building blocks, of matter and everything that we're experiencing. But even more than that, a lot of this draws all the way back to Plato and many of his successors. And the reason why, I'm really going to get into the thick of it and have to explain a million things.
It's such a broad topic. Yeah.
But a lot of it deals not only with his philosophical ideas, but boy, how much time we got?
You've got time.
Okay. Well, we can go into, so when you get into the history, and it's a fascinating history, because in its history, you not only have okay, these are the actual events, these are the actual players, but you have so much mythology and tall tales and everything, because, even in many of these grimoires, they're falsely attributed to one person or another and given dates and time periods in which they were written that were hundreds of years earlier than when they actually were written. And of course, part of this was to escape, the ire of the Inquisition. Who, if you were the author of a grimoire, guess what? You were on their number one most wanted list. But, so if you attributed it to these other people that were oh, well, no, I didn't write it. It's 400 years old from, Pietro di Abano. He wrote the Hetameron, not me. You could kind of sidestep that a little bit, then, not get in as much trouble. Because to own a grimoire, was bad, but to be the author of one was, that really put you in the hot seat. So, if we trace it back, and especially when the cult started, a lot of people, you could most commonly go to, there's a million starting points, but let's just almost arbitrarily say Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. 1500s, man, that's about the time you see a lot of that stuff going. And, in that, you almost have to go to his teacher, which was, and I am going to butcher this pronunciation, so please forgive me.
You're in a safe space.
Johannes Trithemius. Again, I am butchering it. Apologies. But he was a really interesting guy, because here was a guy who was an abbot. And he went on almost this quest to accumulate, all of these magical books and works, and accumulated a huge library, especially for the time. So much so that it put some financial burdens sometimes. But anyway, but this guy was so influential that he not only was the teacher of Cornelius Agrippa, but he was also the teacher of Paracelsus, very, very well-known alchemist as well. And a lot of what we think of when we think of, the occult really can go back to this guy and those two. So we almost have a trifecta going there. But a lot of stuff can go back, because what they ended up doing, and especially in Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, was to accumulate a large quantity of the grimoires and knowledge and principles that did exist and put it in 3 volumes, or 4 if you take the 4th book, which probably wasn't written by Agrippa. But anyway, but here you have the accumulation of the knowledge at the time, and that was hugely influential for so much that came after that, not only individuals but also groups as well. So that's the 1500s, and that was like a landmark thing. And then in the 1600s, you have the publication of the 3 Rosicrucian manifestos. The Fame, the Confession, and the Chemical Wedding. And these were huge because the Rosicrucian influence upon the occult, that reverberates today. You see that, starting there. And then, of course, when you have it really teaming up with Freemasonry around the 1700s, and then in Germany, you have the Golden Rose Cross, which had its relationship with Freemasonry. And then the 1800s, you have the SRIA, which, was a higher degree system, the Freemasons, and then shooting off of that, you have the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which, obviously, that's a whole story in itself, which I could ramble on about. And then, of course, as part of that was, Aleister Crowley, who then, went off solo and started the AA and OTO from there. And then, of course, you have these other side lineages like the Rite of Memphis Mizraim, which then ties back into the OTO as well. And that was a huge thing. And then, it's just a huge, huge evolution that goes on from there. So you have that whole lineage, which was very, very influential. And especially by the time you get to, say, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they really pulled together a tight curriculum that really covered, in a lot of ways for the first time, for lack of a better way of putting it, a very simplified curriculum, pulling together all these principles where a person could kind of go through and learn a lot of this stuff. And then, of course, by the time you get into the inner order, the Rosicrucian influence becomes very, very obvious. But what was your question?
No, I love this. I love that you kind of started with it being the definition of hidden, like what's hidden, right? I want to know, how would you define occultism to someone who doesn't even understand that much, like who doesn't know, who's never heard of it, doesn't know what it is? Like, what is this? How would you define it?
Well, in a nutshell, in a nutshell, it would be looking at the more mystical aspects of these, even if, boy, how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go with this?
Oh, we're going all the way, Frank!
Yeah, see, you asked for an elevator pitch, and now I'm just...
I know, right.
I have no elevator pitch. You're getting a long dissertation. No, making the unknown known or the unseen seen. I mean, that in the end is, the purpose, for the study. But I guess one of the, and this ties in with maybe some misconceptions or maybe what it's begun or become, or maybe with some assumptions of what it's become versus how it began. Now keep in mind, there were, especially through like late medieval into Renaissance era, you had a good deal of monks actually collecting like grimoires and things like that, and utilizing a lot of these theurgical ritual practices themselves, and they looked at it as a mystic practice. They looked at this as this was a way to go beyond just the dogma. And that's also another thing, when you're talking about things that are hidden or concealed, one of the reasons for that was to keep it from the quote unquote profane, those who would either seek to abuse it or were deemed unworthy for one reason or another, right? So you had things mired down in symbolism and all of that, and to be able to truly understand it, you had to almost have the key to be able to understand it, which was nothing more than just really understanding a lot of the symbology that was being used. But a lot of this, and especially these early days, when you look at these grimoires coming out, late medieval through Renaissance, a lot of these are almost like you'd read them and think you're reading a liturgy. They were very much of the church. They were very much within the Judeo-Christian cosmology and ideas of what it was. And what you see really interesting occurring over the hundreds of years of its use and development and various authors and writers and orders and things is the introduction of other elements, other cultures, other ideas. Like, for example, come in the 1800s, you have the translation of the Rosetta Stone. So you have a lot of Egyptology coming in and symbolism and stuff like that, especially, again, going back to things like the Golden Dawn and the OTO and even Pappus's Martinist order, which I'll try not to ramble too much about. But you start to see the inclusion of these elements, and then by the 1900s, when you have the rise of the New Thought movement, you have these pseudo-psychology, pop psychology elements, being introduced into it as well. And so the real question then becomes, well, how is it able to do that? How is it able to embrace pretty much every tradition, every idea? How can that be so versatile? And part of it is you have to break away from a dogmatic state of mind. You have to break away from this idea of, when you're approaching spiritual or mystic ideas, that it is, there are these absolute set in stone, kind of thing. Because one of the things that, especially when looking at things in a mystic frame of mind, you're moving more away from the logic and rational into more the intuitive, creative, or is Claude de Saint Martin or Jacobin would say, the way of the heart. Those things that are more understood intuitively as opposed to rationally or intellectually. And when you start approaching it in that regard, then it's not so much about having the correct cosmology, having the correct, symbol, or having the correct, view of deity or anything like that. Because those things are all just the translations. Those are all just the different ways of looking and thinking about it. Underneath that, or behind it, is something that is beyond the rational, is beyond, just intellectual understanding. And to be able to let go and be open and to understand that, you have to open up that way of the heart, that more intuitive sense. And to draw an analogy, everybody responds to music, right? Everybody has a song that's like, that speaks to me. That's me. It speaks to some part of your soul that's like, wow, that's a part of me nobody's ever really acknowledged or spoken to, and that song just hits it and encapsulates it just right. But everybody has a different song. Everybody has their own side. Not everybody responds to the same song, the same music. Everybody has one that's there. Now, that doesn't mean somebody else doesn't feel that way about it too, but not everybody responds the same way to it. And it's very similar in any of these traditions or any of these ideas or any of these cosmologies or deities or any of these things. It's kind of like that. It's like, okay, everybody is responsive to it, but not everybody's going to respond to the same one. So the trick is to find the one that speaks to you. And it's kind of the same way again with music. You go out, you buy a bunch of albums or listen. Well, now you don't. You go and stream it on Spotify and find the songs that you like. But you listen to it, and when you find it, and that's the thing. You can go out looking, but you won't know until you find it. Mm-hmm. When you experience it, then you're like. But when you do, you know it. Yeah. And it's very much like that. So go around, poke around, find, look into different things and find your music. Yes. And that's really what it boils down to.
I love that. And that's something that we talked about when we first met. It's kind of like you find that thing that funnels you to the bigger thing, that everyone is connecting to, that thing behind those, you know, those deities or those ideas or that feeling. And even when you do look at deities, a lot of cultures have similar ones, right? We all have like a fertility one or one that protects crops or women or, you know.
Well, there we're getting into, you know, Plato's idea of thought forms, and then let's fast forward quite a bit into Jung's idea, you know, theory of archetypes, you know, and which does echo, you know, Plato, which is this idea that there are the, you know, non-tangible, you know, formless, you know, for lack of anything else, calm ideas, you know, that form almost a framework, you know, and these are universal. And to a certain degree, you see this idea echoed in Jung's idea of universal archetypes, you know, and so, for example, let's take the trickster. You know, there's an archetype, you know, everybody has. You know, you've got Loki, you've got Kokopelli, you've got, you know, all those. Well, let's look, you know, something more modern. You have clowns, right? But even within clowns, you have a wide variety. You've got Bozo the clown, who's jovial and there for a good day. He's somewhat mischievous, but hey, it's all fun and good, right? And then you have, you know, the Joker from Batman, who's a little bit more malicious and not quite as good. So you see how even when you have some that are universal in nature, they get translated, you know, through personal experience, culture, you know, all of these things until it gets to the subjective level, you know, of ourselves. And then how do we interpret it individually? And that is where the real interesting conversation, you know, takes place, you know, between, you know, in that internal dialogue with oneself, because there is a conversation going on, you know, by how they're revealed and how they're perceived, and of course, well, that's a whole nother tangent. I'll leave that, but that's a good.
That'll be part 2.
Well, I mean, kind of going into that whole conversation with the self, I can't help but think of something like chaos magic, you know? Where you're just kind of pulling whatever from whatever and creating your own like ritual or version and sigils and things like that, like whatever comes to your mind. And I don't know, that's just kind of what it brought me to.
No, I love the chaos magic approach to a lot of magic because it completely strips away all dogma, you know, from it. It's not like, you know, there's no gatekeepers there, man. They're all like, go for it. Does it work for you? Cool, do that. You know, and it's largely that. Like they're, you know, one of their methods of sigil creation that, you know, using words and rearranging the letters and even getting rid of certain parts of the letters and then, you know, doodling it a little more until you're happy with it. And then, you know, when you feel like, oh, okay, this is it, got it. You know, it is very much a personal, and again, we return to the intuitive and the creative rather than purely the logic and rational. Now, that's not to say the logic and rational is bad because, you know, a lot of the time, especially when you're first starting off on a lot of these things, having some kind of almost formula, you know, to go off of. You know, it's almost like when you're learning music, you know, you don't just go straight into writing songs. You know, you learn some theory, you learn other people's songs, you know, and that gives you a familiarity, you know, but then eventually you got to break away, you know, and you got to make that your own. You know, you need to find and develop your own voice in the art, right? And that's really, in a lot of ways, what this boils down to is it is an art, you know, and you are finding your voice always, you know, in this art and reinventing your voice many times too. And as you change, it changes, you know, and continues to develop in that way. That's why for me, one of my personal favorite rabbit holes that kind of go down in all of this is the relationship between art and, you know, the mystical. You know, and we see this through all of history, you know, and in a lot of ways, you could almost say that it is the earliest mystical practice there is, you know, going all the way back into, you know, cave paintings when they're like, okay, we need a good hunt, you know, and so we're gonna paint these and throw the spears at it and good, you know, and it was almost a ritualistic, you know, activity to ensure, you know, they got some game, you know, that day. But then we also see it throughout all of history through individuals and organizations. Hildegard of Bingen, the nun who had the visions and polymath and brilliant. I mean, just, hundreds of years before her time. She should have been born in the Renaissance, practically. She was just brilliant mind. But we see her, through music and illumination, manuscripts and the images that she would paint, just brilliant works. And then, of course, we have more obvious examples, with Joseph and Pelledan, in France, late 1800s in his Salon Rose-Croix, the art salons that he would, put on, that he viewed these art salons as just an extension of the magical order that he had, because he saw this connection between art and the transcendental experience, it was just one and the same, right there. And then, of course, you see all the different mystical art groups, especially, again, going late 1800s, early 1900s. A.F. Clint, a woman who practically invented abstract art, had a group they called the Five, right? And it was her and 4 other women, and they were all artists, and they would do everything from, having seances where they would try to channel their spiritual masters or whatever. And then once they channel them, do these automatic drawings where they would, practically channel, these others, and they view themselves almost as the conduit, for that to come through and be expressed. So, yeah, the idea between the connection between art and the mystical and spiritual is, is as old as we are,
That's awesome. What are some of the misconceptions you think people have about occultism? You kind of mentioned it a while back. You said, people have them, but I would like to go into what those are.
I mean, even that is subjective, right? Because, like we were talking about, it encompasses just about everything. But I think one of, I would say is a misconception is that there's something either nefarious or satanic or something like that associated with it. And, if you go into, and actually look at it, that would be the complete antithesis of anything that the traditional occult practices were, because a lot of these were, trying to come into contact with or otherwise communion with divinity, in however you would express or explain that, whether, in a Judeo-Christian God sense or, in, higher self or whatever you want to, call it or explain it as. But to say that there was anything nefarious about it, I think is a bit of a misnomer. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been those throughout history that had nefarious intent, behind it. Because obviously, any time that you start to get into anything of a spiritual nature, you're going to have these individuals that are going to want to use it and exploit it for their own gain. But to say that it is by its own nature alone, I think is a grave misconception. And not only that, but to completely close oneself off to the idea of the mystical experience, which is really what that kind of thinking leads to, is, when you begin to just wholesale demonize it and look at it as something evil and nefarious, of course the natural inclination is, okay, cut that off. That's bad. But in truth, it is intended to be something to elevate. It is intended to something to open someone up to the possibilities, to the experience of something more. And again, however you wish to define that, by whatever your cosmological or otherwise beliefs are, whatever your music is, and however you want to translate that.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me back to the whole hat thing, because that person who trolled you seems to think that this is a satanic and Freemason at the same time.
I think that's why my first reaction was to not even bother.
Yeah.
So what do what are you going to say? You know, it's who am I to dissuade someone from that?
And I want to, we are running close to time, but
wow.
to close this out, I want to talk about the hat again.
Yes.
What role does the hat play in all of this?
What role do you want it to play? I mean, here we go back to the personal association, right? I mean, for me, it's all just kind of good fun, but you know, like most things, you know, it's going to have the meaning that you assign to it. Now that doesn't mean to say that there isn't certain power. There we go. We'll use a generic term behind certain symbols and ideas and things like that. But in the end, even if you're using the most quote unquote, you know, powerful symbol there is, if it doesn't speak to you, if it doesn't have personal meaning, if it doesn't like your favorite song, you know, that speaks to you on that deep level, if it doesn't hit you in that way, then it doesn't matter what it is, because it's not going to make that connection. Mm-hmm. It's not going to facilitate much of anything than waving your hands around and, you know, pantomiming, you know, whatever ritual you're doing. You know, if it isn't first hitting you on that very, very basic core at your roots and shaking them, you know, if that isn't happening, then yeah, the rest is.
Do you know when like the hat became more prominent into trying to channel into the divinities?
I you know, I should have brushed up on my Fez history before I came here.
No, it's all good. It's Leah and Bethany. I think it's one of her songs, right? She keeps coming back to that.
I love the hat, but you know, when
It's
a lot
hitting
of
her, Frank. It's hitting her.
I feel like a lot of people, when you get into this stuff, one of the first people you hit is Aleister Crowley, right? And some of like the most famous images of him are wearing his little like
triangle hat.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's doing the
exactly.
But
then you can also, again, coming back to music, Devo has the power dome.
they have the upside down pot.
I'm just
pots
saying,
on their head. Yes.
like you know.
You know, I hadn't thought about it before, but those pretty much are Fez hats, right?
Yes. Yes,
The
and
Devo Fez.
and they're called power domes.
They're
Like,
called
come
power
on.
domes. That's, leave
Makes you
it.
see Devo in a totally different light.
I
Were they whipping?
I am now a Devo devotee.
Yeah, devotee. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And yeah, we're pretty much at our hour, Frank. Oh my God.
Oh, I feel like we're just getting started.
We are just getting started. And that's why we're going to need a part 2.
Okay. So part 2, I can actually get into the nitty-gritty.
Yes, that's when we're going to. I mean, this was just a quick scratch on the surface, really. But I mean, we are talking about something that is so vast. Like you've said so often, like it crosses all of time and all of the cultures, and we're trying to get some kind of grasp of it.
Well, I don't know if I did that today. I think I just rambled a lot more than anything. I don't know if I gave any clarity. My apologies. But hey, if you're listening, thank you.
Frank, let the people know where they can find you on all the things.
So, we are Curia Arcanum's House of Curiosities. We're located at 5924 South Congress. We are in building number 2, unit number 23. Now, when you drive up, you will see a bunch of gray buildings and you'll think, what am I doing in this condo complex? Well, let me explain. So it's a newfangled thing that's been popping up all over the nation. It basically, where they have condos in the back and businesses in the front, it's basically the lamest mullet ever. But they've got the condos in the back and businesses along the front. And that's where we are, along the front. So our front door actually faces South Congress. Now, when we are open, you will know it is us when you see a 8-foot tall Toph Egyptian god statue that stands out welcoming you as you drive by. And that's where you can find us. Check your parking, and yeah, we're we're right here. So if you see a big gray block that you're like, this can't possibly be it, look in the window and see if you see cool window curtains, and then you'll know. No, and look for Toth, and that's how you'll know you're in the right place.
Yeah, it's like walking through like a different into a different dimension, because you're out in this like cold corporate parking lot, and then you walk in and it's fucking magic.
Oh, thank you, and thank you. Yeah, that's part of the idea, actually, is, I joke sometimes and I say that, where we are is terrible from a marketing perspective, but it's awesome from an experience. Because, you like you said, it's just this really drab gray, on the outside, because we have an HOA and I can't do anything. But when you come inside, the juxtaposition, I think, is a hopefully pleasantly jarring experience. Where you walk in and, brighter colors. Well, definitely on the bottom floor. When you come up to the second floor, it's a little bit darker. But on the bottom floor, you've got something that I hope is a little bit more lively than anything. But one of the ideas that we always wanted to do was to have a space where, when you came to it, it felt like you were stepping off the crossroads of, the mundane life that, tends to go on, the very, okay, you wake up and you do this and you have to have responsibilities and everything else. And, I think in especially as you get older, having the opportunity to just let the imagination run amok, a little bit, and kind of explore wild and crazy ideas and stuff like that, we're dissuaded from that. And it's too bad, because, I think the imaginative and creative and intuitive faculties are things that are just as important as the rational, intellectual, endeavors. And, really, if you look at it historically, it's those times when we find the balance between the two, is when we collectively as humans have done amazing things. Go to the moon. Holy, what kind of sci-fi is that? Well, crap, check that off the list. Imagine the amount of just creativity and imagination and everything that went into making that happen. And that was only possible because it embraced and enhanced all the faculties that we have, in particular the creative, imaginative, intuitive. So yes, all that to say, come on in.
Frank, you do a beautiful job here.
Yes, so awesome.
Fantastic. Also, make sure to check him out on Instagram.
Yes, Instagram, Facebook, right?
Any other social platforms?
TikTok, right?
We technically have a TikTok, but I got to admit, and here I'm giving away my age too, I really don't have a clue when it comes to so hey, if anybody wants to take over our TikTok, man,
it's a lot of work.
I don't know what to do. I posted like, I think 5 things on there ever, and it's like a couple like, okay, I guess I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So, so anybody that understands TikTok, man, help.
Reach out.
Help, 'cause I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Come take videos of this cool shit in here.
I don't know. Give me some of that. Tell me what to, because I don't have a clue.
That's awesome. Well, awesome. Thanks so much, Frank, for hanging out with us. Thank you for letting us hang out in your beautiful shop. This is
so
fantastic.
awesome. Thank you.
And I can't wait for part 2 with you.
I look forward to it. Yay! More rambling. No, thank you. Thank you.
Heck yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, man. Frank is not from Earth, y'all.
He really is from like another dimension or something, and it's fucking awesome. What a great, time. I really enjoyed listening to him talk about just occultism.
Yeah, man. It was just really good. And I'm glad that we had the opportunity. And what I'm even more excited about is that this is just the beginning, baby.
Yeah.
There's so much more.
Yeah, there is a lot more
deeper and deeper.
But yeah, it was a great conversation. If you ever want to go and learn or talk about occultism or anything in the world of magics, definitely hit them up.
Oh, yeah.
Go chat with Frank. Go chat with Consuelo. buy some merch and do some spells.
Oh, sounds like a fun day. But still, so much.
Bro.
Definitely. It makes me tired and weak.
Bro, I'm exhausted. That's Gwen's baby.
Give me the power, I beg of you. Hare to a Dumbledore. Give me the power, I beg of you. L'avoir monsieur de Boischelio. Ce soir Etienne au bois de mort. Hare to a Dumbledore. Wake!
Take a big, deep breath in. Release that mother sucker out. You are cleansed.
I needed that, man.
Officially. Anyways, until next time, everyone. Per usual. I'm Bethany.
And I'm Leah.
And we're signing off with 2 besitos.
From these potitos. Please note, this episode was recorded with COVID masks on and dogs barking in the background because we are house sitting.
Batch.
Please note, this episode was recorded with COVID masks on and dogs barking in the background because we are house sitting.